Howdy, BHRCers. You can find every episode of Why People on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcast content. On this episode of Why People, episode number 14, we'll talk to Kelley Morse, who's the Chief People Officer at Bullhorn, one of the coolest backgrounds, and has been at some of the coolest tech companies in the Boston area. We'll get a good chance to hear all about Kelley, so stay tuned. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Why People podcast, episode number 14. For those folks tuning in for the first time, Why People is a Boston HR Council production. The BHRC is one of the largest HR executive communities in the world with over 1,000 active CHRO, Chief People Officer, and VP of HR members. I want to introduce co-founder of the BHRC and co-host of Why People, Paul Roberts.
Thank you, Sean. Good day to all. Very excited for one of my favorite BHRCers today. Can't wait to get to it.
Thanks, Paul, and excited to introduce Kelley Morse, the Chief People Officer at Bullhorn. Kelley, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, I'm excited to be here. Ready to have an awesome discussion.
Yeah, us too. Super excited. We have to cop to the fact that we're pretty tight with Kelley, so this will be a lot of fun for us. So Kelley, I know you've seen or you've heard a little bit of these, but you haven't, been a full-time follower along of the podcast. So just to kind of, keep you, grounded in how we'll go through this here is really keep the same cadence. We start kind of, learning about the guest's background. We talk a little bit about current day and about what's going on relative to the function right now. And then we spend some time, thinking about the future and asking for some advice. So please, kick us off. Tell us a little bit about Kelley Morse and how the story starts.
Yeah, so it's great to be here. I am Kelley Morse, and I think, we don't need to go so far back as when I was a baby, but I am a born and raised in Minnesota girl. So, Midwestern at my core. I moved out to Boston about 17 years ago, if you can believe it. And what I always say is found my people and my speed, and have been here ever since. So haven't looked back and have really been able to make an awesome career out here with some of the different companies that have been headquartered here. And now that we're kind of more of a remote environment, maybe Boston isn't as core anymore, but still is true to my heart.
Well, thanks for that background, Kelley. And a question or kind of a conversation we always like to start with is we love to ask the question, Kelley, and you can go as far back as you want or get as detailed as you want, but thinking about where you're at now, right? A Chief People Officer at Flywire, one of the, leading tech companies really, across the world, definitely in fintech. But can you reverse engineer and tell us a little bit about maybe when you knew or even understood what HR was? Was there any kind of in school, was it a course? Was it someone you looked up to? Just curious on when that bone, started ticking for you a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I'm actually, when you say reverse engineer, I think that's the only way you can explain sort of my career. In college, I was a communications theory major, which isn't like normal communications. It was the theory of it. I didn't really have a strong path or place that I knew I wanted to go. So I got an internship in college and I was doing contract recruiting for an events marketing company nationwide. And I did that for a couple of years. So there was kind of a little hint into HR, in terms of the recruiting and all of that. But really, I considered myself like someone who worked for an events management company. When I moved out to Boston, I took a total career path. It was hard to find a job. And so there's a ton of agencies out here who were hiring for executive assistants. And so I kind of chased a little bit of money for a bit. And I worked at hedge funds for about a year and got some really interesting experience there. And again, kind of sucked up everything I could. I was there for about a year. And then I moved over to Hill Holiday as an executive assistant there. And I spent 4 years there. And I loved Hill. And I think Hill was really important for me in seeing what a culture of a company could be like. They have a really, really strong culture, very human company. And I think that's, to me, where I started to kind of see some more of that like cultural awakening, if you will, from an HR perspective. I also got to run some development programs. Again, I was just picking up everything I could when I was in that EA role. And so, I got to work on this program called 4As. It's a rising advertising star program. And so that's kind of like got me into like thinking about people development. So that's probably my earliest intro into HR. And then I got my MBA and, had a focus on org change, which I found to be really interesting. So I think that's kind of like when it started, but I wasn't in an HR career path, if you will, at that point. But I was just picking up everything I could, trying to learn and see what I liked. And so that's kind of how I ended up, really being more attracted to HR type things. And then I kind of shifted my career after that.
Wow. That's really interesting, Kelley. And I'm curious, whenever we chat with your peers, everyone's kind of foray into HR in general was kind of unique and always like seems to start out, I'm going to say untraditional, but if you hear it 15 times in a row, it ends up being, I guess, somewhat traditional. Did you know in the time, in that EA role, did you know that what you were doing was HR, or did it just feel like more of expanded duties? Like, what did that feel like?
I didn't know HR per se. Like, I didn't have a ton of I had HR friends, but I didn't understand what the function really was. I just knew I liked things that involved people and people development. And, in the executive assistant role, you need to build a lot of relationships. You work with a lot of executives. You have to understand how the business runs. And I think I tell a lot of folks earlier in their career, it doesn't matter what role you're in, there's opportunity to absorb so much. And I did that in my EA role. I learned how to work with executives. I learned what they thought about. And I think it was instrumental in sort of, the hockey stick that was my path when I sort of got into HR officially. So, but it's hard, I'll tell you, it's hard to break in. Executive assistants can be paid very nicely. And so I knew that breaking in would have to be, I couldn't take a pay cut just because I was, single woman living on my own. So I kind of had to come in through a different route. And so I was very specific about finding an EA role for an HR head, because I knew once I got in and worked alongside a head of HR, a chief people officer, that would give me career opportunity. And that's what I did. So that was probably the most intentional thing I've done in my career to get myself kind of on that HR path.
Hockey stick analogy, another sign you're from Minnesota.
I know, right? And that's not, actually, it sounds a little egotistical, but I think if you look at my entire career, I think, my true HR experience only been the last 10 or 12 years. So I've had a nice rise, and it's a testament, I think, not to sound like a bragger, but to myself, but also the great companies that I've worked for.
Well, Paul brought us back to Minnesota, and I think it's a good place to take a quick pause here. Love that you kind of gave a shout out to where where you were born and grew up. Does anybody, and now that Flywire, where you work now is really, national, global, you guys do business all over the place. Does anybody ever say they can see, the Minnesota in you? Is there any, any qualities or characteristics that someone says, oh, now I see it, Kelley, anything that sticks out?
Yeah, there's sometimes I have some funny sayings that I don't realize are funny sayings that only Minnesota people know. Is this a profanity okay podcast or?
Yeah.
Okay. So I hear it sometimes when I have these sayings, right? So there's this saying in Minnesota, oh, we went out and we were whipping shitties. And it's you're taking your car out for spins. And so I have some coworkers that are whipping shitties, it's every once in a while a little phrase will come out and they'll be that is so Minnesota. But no, I think like I said, the East Coast, the pace, the more direct personality styles is just a little bit more my jam. Not saying all of my Minnesota people, but
Did you follow Randy Moss? Was that timing the same? Did you guys come out here together from Minnesota?
And KG.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I brought
big three. Moss, KG, and Kelley Morse.
Yeah, you're welcome, everybody. I conned them in. But no, my Patriots jersey actually is a Moss jersey. So
great BHRC meme in the making here, the big three, Kelley, KG, and Randy. Wow, this is great.
I mean, legit, right?
Yeah. And I've never heard that term from Minnesota, Kelley, and I'm assuming I know out here in Boston that probably means something entirely different.
Donuts here, right? Essentially, it's our donuts doing a donut in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Yeah.
Whipping shitty smells better.
Yeah.
Well, Kelley, we're in a pretty good spot here understanding, kind of, I'd say your early career. Tell us a little bit about, once you started doing, more of these projects and then started kind of digging in a little bit, what did it look like for you to say, oh, this HR thing, like this is what I'm interested in? And then maybe a second part to that is, when did you start to define a little bit like what a career path could and would look like?
Yeah. So once I got that EA role, it was at a startup biotech company. It was on a pretty big, growth trajectory. And so it was working for the head of HR there. I think I had 3 or 4 promotions in my time there. It was really cool because I think I was employee 52. And in my 4 years, I think we grew to 350 or something like that. So if you think about a company at its stage at 52 people versus, you got to build all that infrastructure and try to scale up. That to me was a really fun challenge of people, process, structure, framework, and building a culture. And so it was really fun to kind of learn from, some of the more experienced HR people and kind of watch that in action and then, be part of a small enough team. And so that's where I really got hooked is this stuff I love the building and the evolving and I understood the business and I think I built a lot of relationships. And so I was like, oh, I can make something of this here. So that company did a major layoff and actually deprioritized HR. And I included myself in that layoff. I went out, I had a baby. And then as I was thinking about what was next, I had a colleague that I had worked with who had become a good friend of mine, and she was going out to have a baby. And she said, we're looking for someone to cover my mat leave. And so she was like, it's mostly focused on learning and development. And then we enter Flywire. So that was my foray into Flywire. It was really just covering a mat leave for a friend while I figured out what was next. And from me there, Flywire was this really cool combination of startup, high growth, culture focused, good leadership, and a chance to help build out a strong infrastructure in HR that focused on people. And so that was a very, very, very fun journey.
Well, it sounds like it, and appreciate you kind of going into the detail there about, kind of the ebbs and flows that happen kind of in that world, right? Startup, life science, technology. I mean, it's happening all the time. So curious, Kelley, someone like you that is such a, well-respected person in the HR and people space, have you ever, and you said the word, right? You said decide to deprioritize HR, being in the technology and life science space, and we're familiar with it here in Boston. It's a little bit of a different ecosystem in the sense that a lot of times, it is founder-led at certain times, and, people's own, sometimes their own investment is into it, right? So figuring out where to invest, institutionally is something that people are challenged with. How have you overcome, or how have you thought through how the role or how the function is prioritized in different places that you've been?
Yeah, it's interesting because when it's not prioritized, you can tell immediately. And that's where someone like myself runs into a lot of obstacles, right? And a lot of pushback. So, after Flywire, I left because it had grown, and, I just, it was time for me to kind of try something new. And so I took a head of HR role at a AI health tech company. And that was probably the most challenging time in my career, because as much as everyone sort of said, oh, HR and people are a priority, when you get down to it, that I struggled. It was like an uphill battle. It was like rolling a rock, up a hill. And so I didn't last there for a long time because it's really hard, because I think when the magic of HR and the impact, and, I say HR, it's so outdated, but the people function can have an incredible impact on the business and make executives' lives easier, make the business run better. And so when you get out of that environment, you go and you're constantly receiving pushback, it's no fun. And it doesn't matter the industry, right? There's industries, it's agnostic. There's companies that really care and prioritize and put their money where their mouth is. And there's companies that say it and don't stand up to it. And so I think it's not an industry specific thing. I think you'll find it, across the board in any industry.
Yeah. And so this is kind of a great point now, right? So appreciate you kind of bringing us through, and the, the Flywire part of your journey was really neat to watch. And, Paul and I have been fortunate to kind of watch Bullhorn do some really amazing things in the last, I think of it in my, simple brain. I think of like the last 3 years, like, man, what you guys have done has been pretty remarkable. But just tell us a little bit about, getting started there and how your path kind of came to where it is right now.
Yeah, so this is another piece. I love to share this part of my career because, again, I thought I was being really intentional. So I mentioned that health tech company. I realized it wasn't the right fit for me. I was also pregnant with my third child. And so I knew that this sort of crazy startup world, I couldn't keep pace with anymore. And I knew I needed to make a change. And I had done startups, and they can be a lot, right? They take a lot out of you. They're super fun, but they're also sometimes exhausting. And so I knew I wanted to go work for a bigger company. So I went out on my search and I came across 2 companies, one a small startup where I would have been the head of people, and Bullhorn. And Bullhorn was a step back in my career, if you will. It was a HR business partner role in a larger team. And so I got 2 very significant offers that were great. I really struggled to pick one. And I said, stop doing what you've been doing, right? Like, I've read this startup chapter before. So I went with Bullhorn. And I've talked about this internally with some of our executives. But right after I started, again, I was 4 or 5 months pregnant. The chief people officer role, the person that I had come to work for, left. And I was really disappointed in that because I had come to work for that person. And so we had some tumultuous times with a new chief people officer, and I really wanted to leave, but I was pregnant because it was not the intentional career path that I had wanted so badly. So this is in 2020. I'm sure you all, get a little, you have your own memories of that, right? So mine was dealing with COVID and all of that. And then also this leadership change that just was not the right fit for me. And also being, 6 months pregnant at that point. So I wanted to leave. I was like, I'm done with Bullhorn. I'll probably just have my baby and we'll head out. And then that leader left and we got put underneath someone else internally. And I am so glad I stuck around because Bullhorn, I think, just has a lock and key fit for me from a culture perspective. And I've just it brings out the best in me. I think I've been able to have an incredible impact. We've transformed the HR team in terms of how the business sees us. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to just put forth all the things that I've learned in my path and put them into practice. And the executive team, my fellow colleagues, it was needed in the business and accepted. And I barely hit any obstacles since then. So I think 3 or 4 promotions later, I'm at the chief people officer role, sitting on the exec team now. So sometimes I think oh my God, what if I hadn't been pregnant? I probably would have just quit. And I'm so glad I didn't. So I often say my third child, Mallory, saved me from myself, my own flight instincts, and I stuck with it. And so I like to give that career advice to people. Is there's been times in my career where I've just wanted to give up, and I didn't this time, and it so worked out for me.
Yeah. What a cool story. And geez, every one of your peers we talked to, Kelley, the different forks in the road, could have zigged, but I zagged, and all of those things. It always seems to matter. It seems to add up. And really, sometimes we talk to folks that say, I took a left turn and quickly found out that I was going the wrong way and did the 3-point turn. But mostly people's intuition or whatever is seems to pull them in the right direction, which I think is pretty cool. And here you talk about Bullhorn. One of the things I had written down in my prep notes was when we chat with you, whether it's out at a BHRC event or about maybe not the most exciting HR components in the world, right? Whenever we talk to you, I can really tell your full personality kind of comes out in the way that you lead your team and the way that you support Bullhorn. Tell us, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about how you're able to do that and how, what the safety is there to kind of let you do, your own thing to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I think, for me, it comes back to the Bullhorn core values. I know a lot of companies have core values, and, I've been preaching on my whole life. Bullhorn's core values are embedded in how we operate. And so be human is one of them. right? Give people the benefit of the doubt, like bring yourself to work. And so they're also speed and agility and ownership. Those are also things that resonate with me. But like Be Human allows me to just like pull down any polish and facade that like, being an executive you think you might need to have, and just allows me to like, let's cut through the crap and like just talk and be transparent with each other and all of that. So I think for me, those core values underline like are just how we operationalize. It makes me feel like comfortable being myself, because yes, I do have a very, very big personality. I am loud and energetic, and I'm a cheerleader, and I swear a lot, and I get fired up, and I think my team understands, and people who know me understand like that it comes from just like a passionate place. And so it's not like, Kelley, you need to tone it down. It's like, that's Kelley, and she brings it. But I do really care about, you can call them HR things, you can call them people things, but like, how cool is it that my job is about ensuring that employees at Bullhorn have an incredible employee experience? Like, that's awesome. That's really cool. And it hits so many different things, right? It's a in-person, it's a virtual, it's benefits, it's pay, it's growth, it's understanding what their own career path is, it's mentorship, it's guidance. Like, those are all awesome programs. And I actually don't understand why everyone doesn't want to be in HR. Like, why wouldn't you want to focus on all those things?
Here we go.
I know. Paul's like, I don't want to be in HR.
Well, that would not be good for anybody, Kelley. I think we know.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just think like, again, I talk about culture fit. There's a lot of different kinds of culture out there. And Bullhorn, I think, has an amazing culture, and it works for so many of our employees. So I always tell people, if like you feel like you're fighting uphill, like the values just don't resonate with you, like that's okay. There's a company out there that probably has values that line up with yours. And once you find it, it's a great fit.
Well, it's fun to hear you talk about that, Kelley, because we've had the chance to get to know some of your team, and you can kind of feel that all the way throughout your whole team. You have some really amazing team members, and they kind of operate the same exact way. Very much great personalities, and seemingly able to have a whole lot of fun and do a whole lot of very important work, kind of like hand in hand. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think we do.
So, all right. So this has been really neat to kind of learn and understand how you've, got to the chief people officer position at Bullhorn, which is a highly regarded company here in Boston and across the globe. We like to pivot here kind of in the tail end of the conversation to think a little bit about the future. So sitting in your seat now, how you're thinking about things, the things that you're working on. What's kind of top of mind as you think about not just your role, but just the function in general as we, move forward the next 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think, top of mind for me next year is pay transparency. We're going to have a lot more laws that, sort of push us in that direction. But I do think it's a good thing. I'm personally kind of excited about that. And pay transparency is a spectrum, right? Pay transparency doesn't mean like you tell everyone what everyone makes, but it's just the kind of like demystifying the whole comp thing for folks, which I think can be really, leveling in terms of the playing fields for folks and just understanding. And I think there's a lot more benefits that will come from employees when you sort of pull down the black box and kind of let everybody behind the curtain a little bit. So I think that's going to be a good thing over the next couple of years for the HR function, and how it will have a really direct impact on employee engagement and how they feel about, their compensation and their pay and their future and things like that.
I was just going to ask, do you consider yourself a comp person, Kelley? We've chatted with a lot of folks. Some people love it. Some people love it, but geez, the financial science behind it is a lot. Like, where do you put yourself on that spectrum?
I love it. I really love it. It kind of like satisfies this like analytical side of my brain. That's not it. Look, I'm not like super analytical, but I like it to a certain point. So it really satisfies that. But I think for me, in a couple companies now, I've been able to go out and build out a compensation framework. And I think, some people could be really intimidated by that and say, oh, I don't know that. But like, if you understand the basics and you understand your culture and where you're at, you can put together a framework that works for your company that gets you 90% of the way there. And so I have one woman on my team. She's hybrid and does a lot of other things too. And her and I are kind of the comp people. And I love working on it. I did make a joke to my CEO recently of like, Art is like super smart, and we were talking about comp, and he was throwing out terms, and I was like, whoa, 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 like that's beyond my like ability to understand. And so I think I know my limitations, and I think I'm honest enough at some point that I'll probably be able to get Bullhorn to a certain point, and then we may need to like bring in some experts to help. But I love it for now, and I think I can get it 90% of the way, that has the most impact.
Yeah, I mean, compensation is to me, it's a fun one because it's obviously very important. It's important at all organizations. It's something that's uber sensitive to people across the board. But when you dig into it, a lot of times, the compensation, whatever that number or numbers or bands, whatever that data is really kind of the end of the formula, and it's really the inputs relative to that are the interesting pieces in it. You know what I mean? And whenever anyone brings up compensation or pay transparency, I kind of perk up a little bit because, again, like you, Kelley, I'm analytical, but not the most analytical. But it certainly is a cool conversation because I've yet to chat about anything that moves the needle across the board more than that. So.
And I think the other thing that's really interesting to me is I love looking at the data and then cutting it and trying to find like, one of the big things that I look at is like, once we run all of it is like, do we have, inequity anywhere and why? So for me, that's part of the like, let's take the data and like, what's it telling us? And are there outliers? And then going in and getting to like dig in and understand that, and then solve for it if it's an issue. And I love doing that. And so we've been doing that about twice a year now. And I personally do it because it's like, I love it. I love it. So
we'll kind of pivot now towards the end of the conversation, Kelley. This has been a blast. And even, Paul and I know you pretty well, and, got a whole bunch of nuggets here that I didn't know. So this is recording right at the end of the year in 2023. We've published this now in the middle of January of 2024. But a question for you is, and kudos to you and some of your peers, but the Boston HR Council has been a pretty, well-known community now for the past 4 years. There's been a lot of interest, and as such, we've had a lot of folks that are earlier on in their careers reach out to us and say, hey, the HR and people folks that you hang around with and that you spotlight and then you chat with, it seems like a really cool career. I didn't know so much. Now, I guess the joke is Paul and I always have to say, well, they do a lot more than just party and hang out at Celtics games and things like that. That's just what we post on LinkedIn. But in all seriousness, there a lot of folks in the New England area have reached out to us that are interested in kind of getting into the profession. The question though is, Kelley, and again, I rooted folks with where we are timeline here, recording late in 23, early 24 publish. It's a little bit of a tough market out there for HR professionals, and as you mentioned, a lot of across the board people kind of can squeeze what that headcount looks like in a lot of different areas. So, general question for you: if you were somebody earlier on in your career, either looking to start an HR people career out of college or out of high school, or you're looking to make a career pivot, like what's a good place to start? What's a good place to think about?
Yeah, I think for me, some of the fundamental like characteristics or things that make a good HR person is just natural curiosity. And so for me, it's not so much like you start in a specific role, but like, are you curious about what you're doing? Or are you just like, you got to understand the context and the bigger picture. And I'll give an example of like, every day people in HR deal with employee relations experience. And so at its surface level, you could have an answer like that person should go on a PIP, right? Or whatever your standard HR answer is. But a good HR practitioner digs in and understands what are the dynamics that employees going through, how is the manager doing, and sort of tries to get a full picture. Are there things that have changed, goals that have changed? Why is this employee seemingly underperforming? And so that natural curiosity to ask questions is something that like just dig, right? And I think so you can do that in any role, in any spot that you're in. And so don't wait for the destination. Like if I had waited to get into the destination of HR, I would have been way behind. I would have missed 8+ years of opportunity to learn things that I actually do in my everyday now. And so don't wait until you're in HR to do HR. HR is more than just HR. It's about people and environment and context and relationships, and you can do all those things no matter what role you're in. And then it's about how you sort of package it up and sell it. So that's my biggest advice to people is like, you want to get into HR, first of all, Godspeed to you. It's not for the faint of heart. I know that, I touch a lot about the things that I'm passionate about, but it can be a hard profession. It can be a draining profession. I know many of us are tired after the last 3-4 years. And then this year has not been just kind of all dragging around. So we all have hope for 2024, but yeah, it can be a little bit of a draining profession. So you have to really want to just stick with it.
Yeah. It's well said, Kelley. And then I guess maybe a follow-up in the last question here. For folks that are early on in their HR career and that think they might be interested in kind of the path to leadership or executive leadership, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, spend some time in every part of the functions of HR, right? So if you look back upon my career, I started off in contract recruiting, so I had great, recruiting experience. Through my EA role, ran that learning and development program, so there was sort of a programmatic L&D aspect. I never spent time in comp, but it's really helpful to spend time in each of these functions because as an executive now, I'm not necessarily in the day-to-day weeds, but I'm guiding teams that are. And so I need to have general understanding of those pieces. I have some weak spots in mind. Benefits is probably one of them. But I think as an executive, you then bring in people that are the subject matter experts and rely on them, but also don't ever rely too much, inspect, ask questions, poke around. So yeah, I think for anyone who's in HR, don't be afraid to take a lateral stint in another function. If you want to go up, sometimes you just have to go lateral before you can go up.
Well, Kelley, this has been a whole bunch of fun. I know I've been on you for a long time, and you've been super busy with all that you're doing. But we appreciate you coming on the pod, and really appreciate you as a BHRCer and as a friend.
Yeah, no, you guys, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking to you, and I'm hopeful that I can see you at a lot of BHRC events this year. This year has been no fun in terms of getting out there, but I think next year is going to be a little bit of a different year. So I look forward to seeing everybody there too.
Yeah, maybe when we're there, we'll whip some shitties out there together next time we're together.
Maybe that could be our next BHRC event. Get a little snow maybe in February. We can just get in some cars and whip some shitties. Sounds not safe. We need waiters, right?
And not really Kelley's style, but I mean, we should note on the podcast, Kelley is the reigning BHRC Council Member of the Year. So I mean,
oh yeah, guys, I don't mess around.
We got there it is.
That
loud and proud, you guys, loud and proud.
Yeah,
but it's a great community. I'll tell you guys, the amount of connections I've made through that has been really awesome. And so a lot of the chief people officers are people that we text on the side, we email, we ping ideas off of. So, I don't know if anyone ever, maybe I'm sure everyone tells you that, but I've made some really meaningful connections and gotten a lot of valuable guidance from my peers. And that's really a testament to you guys setting up a great community. So thank you.
Well, on that note, Kelley, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you later in 2024.
Sounds good. Thanks, you guys.